The massive chamber floated in the darkness of space, bigger than most planets. Inside, beings from across the galaxy sat in rows that curved around a central stage. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and a few looked almost human, but with different colored skin. This was the Galactic Council, where the most important decisions in the universe were made. Zephyr 9 stood at the center of the chamber. He was old, older than entire civilizations. His body looked like it was made of silver mist that moved and shifted as he breathed. His people, the ethereals, had watched the stars for millions of years. They could see things that would happen. In the future, though not always clearly, the chamber buzzed with angry voices. They were all talking about the same thing: humans. Admiral Korak slammed his clawed fist on his seat. The Draknari warrior was huge, covered in dark scales that gleamed under the chamber lights. His red eyes burned with hatred. These humans spread like a disease across the galaxy. 3 years ago they had one world. Now they have colonies on 20 different planets. How long before they want our worlds too? Ambassador Thiel shook her head. The Zentorian looked like a tall, blue-skinned woman with large black eyes. Her people were known for being peaceful and wise. Korax, you see war in everything. The humans trade with us. They share their technology. Why would they attack us? Because that is what primitives do, Korax growled. They take what they cannot make. They destroy what they cannot understand. I have studied their history, Thiel. They have never known peace on their own world. War is all they understand. Other voices joined the argument. The insect-like hive queen clicked her mandibles in agreement with Korax. The crystalline shard speakers rang like bells as they spoke of human aggression. The gas cloud beings called the Whispers made sounds like wind through caves, warning of human expansion. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the observer section listening to every word. He was the human representative, though he had no vote in the council. The humans were too new to the galaxy to be full members. Jake was a good man, honest and brave, the kind of person Earth sent to represent them among the stars. He had no idea that many of the beings around him saw him as a threat that needed to be removed. Jake watched the debate with growing worry. He had heard whispers in the halls before the meeting. Some species were afraid of humans, others were angry. A few seemed to hate humans for reasons Jake could not understand. Zephyr 9 raised one misty hand, and the chamber fell silent. When the ancient ethereal spoke, everyone listened. His people had guided the galaxy for ages. They had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. I have seen the future, Zephyr 9 said. His voice was like wind through empty spaces, soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. There are many paths ahead of us, but they all lead to the same place if we choose wrong today. Tell us, Ancient One, Ambassador Thiel said with respect. What do you see? Zephyr 9's form shifted, becoming more solid as he focused his power. Around him, images began to appear in the air. They were fuzzy and hard to see, like looking through water, but everyone could make out shapes and colors. I see fire in the void, he said. I see fleets beyond counting. I see worlds that burn not from atomic fire but from something worse, from complete and total defeat. I see proud species broken and scattered. I see the end of the galaxy as we know it. The images showed massive ships moving through space. They were clearly human-made, but larger and more advanced than anything humans currently had. The ships moved with purpose, like predators hunting prey. When does this happen? Korax demanded. How long do we have? That depends, Zephyr 9 replied, on what we choose to do today. The future is not fixed. It can change based on our actions. But I must warn you all, if you strike first against the humans, they will never stop coming. Never. It is not in their nature to forgive or forget when they believe their survival is threatened. Korax laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. You speak of these primitives as if they were gods of war. They have tiny ships and simple weapons. Their technology is centuries behind ours. How could they possibly threaten us because, Zephyr 9 said quietly, they do not think like us. When we fight for territory or resources or honor. When humans fight for survival, they fight to win completely. They do not stop when the battle is over. They do not stop when the war is over. They stop only when they are certain the threat can never return. The chamber erupted in voices again. Some called Zephyr 9 a fool. Others said he was trying to scare them. A few listened carefully to his words. Jake Morrison felt cold fear growing in his chest. He could see the hatred in many faces around him. He began to understand that some of these beings were not just worried about humans. They wanted to destroy humanity before it could grow stronger. "I propose we settle this matter now," Corax announced, standing to his full height. "A limited strike against one of their outer colonies. Nothing too destructive. Just enough to show them their place in the galaxy. They will learn to respect their betters and stay within their borders." "You cannot be serious," Ambassador Thiel said in shock. "You want to attack innocent people to send a message? Better to send a small message now than face a large war." Later, the Hive Queen clicked. "The humans multiplied too quickly. Soon they will be too numerous to control." More voices joined Corax. The shard speakers rang in agreement. The whispers made sounds of approval. Species after species declared their support for a limited attack on human space. Zephyr 9 watched it all with ancient sadness. He had seen this pattern before, many times across the long ages. A young species would show promise and the older ones would grow afraid. Fear would lead to violence and violence would lead to tragedy. "Please," he said, though his voice was nearly lost in the noise. "Do not do this thing. Strike first and they will never stop. I have seen it. The humans are not like other species. They remember every slight, every attack, every drop of blood spilled by their enemies. If you hurt them now, they will not rest until they have removed the threat completely." But his words were drowned out by the calls for action. The vote was called. Species after species voted to approve Corax's plan. Only a few, led by Ambassador Thiel, voted against it. Jake Morrison sat in stunned silence as he realized what had just happened. The Galactic Council had just voted to attack human colonies. He thought of the families on the outer worlds, farming and building new lives among the stars. They had no idea that death was coming for them. The session ended with plans being made. Corax would lead a small fleet to one of the human agricultural worlds. They would destroy enough to send a message, but not enough to start a real war. It would be quick and clean, they said. The humans would learn their lesson and stay in their corner of the galaxy. As the chamber emptied, Zephyr 9 remained behind. He stared into the darkness of space beyond the walls, seeing futures that filled him with dread. He had tried to warn them, but they would not listen. Now events were in motion that could not be stopped. In the Observer section, Jake Morrison was already sending encrypted messages back to Earth. He did not know exactly when or where the attack would come, but he knew it was coming. He hoped the warning would be enough to save some lives. Neither Jake nor Zephyr 9 knew that in 6 months, the galaxy would begin to learn what it truly meant to provoke humanity. The ancient ethereal's prophecy was about to come true in ways that would reshape the stars themselves. 6 months had passed since the vote in the Galactic Council. On the farming world of New Eden, life continued as it always had. The colonists woke with the rising of Kepler 442, the orange star that warmed their new home. They tended their crops, raised their children, and built their simple lives far from the politics of Earth and the dangers of the galaxy. Commander Lisa Grant stood on the observation deck of the colony's small defense station. She was a former Earth Navy officer who had volunteered to protect the outer settlements. The job was usually boring. Pirates rarely came this far out, and the colony had little worth stealing except food and basic supplies. Lisa sipped her morning coffee and watched the sunrise paint the wheat fields gold. New Eden was beautiful in its own way. The colonists had worked hard to make this world feel like home. Children played in the streets of the main settlement. Farmers drove their machines through endless rows of crops that would feed other human colonies across this part of space. Dr. Peter Kim was already at work in the medical center. As the colony's chief doctor, he treated everything from broken bones to difficult births. Peter loved his job. These people depended on him, and he had never let them down. Today seemed like any other day as he checked on his patients and updated medical records. The colony had about 8,000 people spread across 3 main settlements. Most were farmers, but there were also engineers, teachers, doctors, and shopkeepers. They had built schools and libraries and small factories. New Eden was becoming a real world, not just an outpost. None of them knew that death was coming from the stars. War leader Vex commanded the Draknari strike force from his flagship, the Iron Fang. He was young for a Draknari commander, but he had proven himself in battles against pirates and rebels. This mission would be different. He was not fighting warriors today. He was killing farmers to send a message. Vex did not like the mission, but he followed orders. Admiral Korax had been clear. Hit the humans hard enough to make them afraid, but not hard enough to start a real war. Kill a few thousand, destroy some buildings, and leave. The humans would learn their place and stop expanding so quickly. The Draknari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Eden system. 12 ships, more than enough to destroy the colony's weak defenses. They moved toward the planet, like sharks smelling blood in the water. Commander Grant was filling out reports when the alarm started screaming. She dropped her coffee cup and ran to the command center. The screens showed dots moving toward New Eden. Lots of dots. "How many ships?" she asked Lieutenant Bobby Chen, her second in command. 12 confirmed, Bobby replied, his voice tight, with fear. "Big ones, military design. They're not responding to our signals." Lisa felt ice in her stomach. New Eden's defenses were a joke compared to what was coming. They had 2 small patrol boats and a handful of surface-to-air missiles. Against 12 warships, they might as well throw rocks. "Send the evacuation signal," she ordered. "Get every civilian to the shelters and send a message to Earth. Tell them we're under attack." The message that went out to Earth was simple. New Eden under attack by unknown alien force. 12 warships. Request immediate assistance. We will hold as long as possible. But Earth was weeks away, even for the fastest ships. New Eden was on its own. Dr. Kim heard the alarms and knew what they meant. He had been a military doctor before coming to New Eden. He knew the sound of war approaching. He began preparing the medical center for casualties, though he feared there would be too many to save. The Draknari ships entered orbit around New Eden. War leader Vex studied the planet below. Green fields, small cities, peaceful settlements. It looked like a good world to live on. Soon it would be a world of the dead. "Begin the attack," he ordered. The first strikes came from orbit. Energy beams lanced down from the Draknari ships, hitting the defense station and the small spaceport. Commander Grant felt the floor shake under her feet as explosions rocked the building. "Return fire," she shouted, but they both knew it was hopeless. Their weapons could barely reach orbit, and when they did, they bounced off the alien shields like raindrops. The attack was methodical and cruel. The Draknari did not just destroy military targets. They hit schools and hospitals and homes. They wanted to kill as many humans as possible to make their message clear. Dr. Kim worked frantically as the wounded began arriving at his medical center. Burns from energy weapons, broken bones from collapsing buildings, children crying for parents who would never come home. He did what he could, but the casualties kept coming. "Doctor," called Nurse Amy White, tears streaming down her face. "The children's hospital, it's gone. Direct hit." Peter closed his eyes for a moment, then kept working. He could grieve later. Now he had to save who he could. The attack lasted 4 hours. When it was over, New Eden was broken. 3 of the main settlements were rubble. The spaceport was a crater. The defense station was a twisted wreck of metal and concrete. Commander Grant was trapped under debris in the command center. Lieutenant Chen found her there, badly hurt, but alive. She had managed to keep recording everything until the end, documenting the attack for anyone who might find the records later. "Did the message get through?" she asked weakly. "Yes, ma'am," Bobby replied. "Earth knows what happened here." War leader Vex looked down at the burning world and felt sick. This was not war. This was slaughter. But his orders had been followed. The message was sent. He opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. Any human still alive would hear his words. "People of New Eden," he said in heavily accented English. "This is war leader Vex of the Dreknari Empire. You have been punished for your species' arrogance. Your expansion into our galaxy ends now. Return to your home system and stay there. If humans are found beyond their borders again, more colonies will burn. This is your only warning." The Dreknari fleet left as quickly as it had come. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind only death and ruins. Dr. Kim survived the attack. So did about 2,000 other colonists out of 8,000. He worked for days treating the wounded and recording what had happened. His medical logs became some of the most important documents in human history. He described the deliberate targeting of civilians. He recorded the voices of children calling for dead parents. He documented how the aliens had killed people who were trying to surrender. His reports would be read by every human in the galaxy. Commander Grant died 2 days after the attack. Her last words were a message for Earth. "They came without warning. They killed our children. Don't let them do this to anyone else." Lieutenant Chen survived to lead the rescue efforts. He helped organize the survivors and kept them alive until help arrived from other human colonies. But the images he recorded of the destruction would haunt him forever. When the first rescue ships arrived a week later, they found a world transformed. The green fields were black with smoke. The happy settlements were graveyards. The children who had played in the streets were buried under tons of rubble. But they also found something the Dreknari had not expected. They found survivors who remembered everything. They found records and recordings that captured every moment of the attack. They found evidence of deliberate murder on a massive scale. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Every colony, every ship, every person learned what had happened to New Eden. They saw the recordings of children's hospitals being destroyed. They heard the voices of the dying calling for help that never came. On Earth, in the halls of government, military leaders watched the footage in silence. General Alex Rodriguez sat through Dr. Kim's entire medical report without speaking. When it was over, he stood up and walked to his office. He began writing orders, not for rescue missions or diplomatic protests. Orders for war. The Dreknari thought they had sent a message to keep humans in their place, but they had made a terrible mistake. They had left survivors to tell the story, and humans never forgot their dead. 18 months had passed since New Eden burned. The galaxy expected humans to retreat, to pull back to their home system like frightened animals. Instead, something else was happening. Something that made the older alien species very nervous. Admiral Karen Wright stood in the command center of Luna Station, Earth's moon. Around her, hundreds of officers worked at screens showing star maps, ship movements, and production reports. The room buzzed with quiet activity, like a hive preparing for something big. Karen was not like the politicians who talked about peace and diplomacy. She was a soldier who understood that sometimes peace could only be won through strength. The recordings from New Eden had changed everything for her. She had watched children die in those videos. She had heard the voices of the murdered calling out in their last moments. "Status report," she said to Captain Danny Miller, her chief of staff. "All fleets are ahead of schedule, Admiral," Danny replied. "The new ships are coming off the production lines faster than expected. The colonies are exceeding their quotas for raw materials, and our intelligence teams are sending back excellent information." Karen nodded. The plan was working. While the aliens thought humans were cowering in fear, humanity was actually preparing for something the galaxy had never seen before. On the research station orbiting Mars, Dr. Ryan Liu worked 18-hour days in his laboratory. The walls were covered with blueprints and holographic displays showing weapon designs. Pieces of destroyed Dreknari technology sat on tables, taken apart and studied with obsessive care. Ryan had been a peaceful man before. New Eden. He had worked on better engines for cargo ships and improvements to life support systems. Now he designed weapons. The alien attack had awakened something in him that he never knew existed. "The new plasma cannons are ready for testing," said his assistant, Dr. Maria Santos. "The power output is 30% higher than the Dreknari versions." "Good." Ryan replied without looking up from his work. What about the missile systems? Even better. We took their basic design and improved it. Our missiles are faster, smarter, and carry bigger warheads. The aliens taught us how to build them, then we made them better. Ryan smiled grimly. The Draknari had made a mistake when they left wreckage behind on New Eden. Humans were very good at taking things apart and putting them back together in new ways. Every piece of alien technology became a lesson in how to build something superior. In the outer reaches of space, Captain Steve Murphy piloted his stealth ship past a Draknari patrol. His vessel was painted black and covered with equipment that made it nearly invisible to alien sensors. Steve and his team were mappers, but not the kind that drew pictures of planets. They mapped military bases, supply routes, and weak points in alien defenses. Steve had been doing this for over a year now, and he knew more about Draknari military positions than most Draknari commanders. Another supply depot, whispered Lieutenant Tom Brady, studying the scanner readings. Looks like they store fuel and ammunition there for their outer patrols. Steve marked the location on his secret charts. Every depot, every base, every patrol route was carefully recorded. When the time came, human forces would know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The Draknari were not the only ones being watched. Human scouts observed every species that had voted for the attack on New Eden. They learned about alien military capabilities, political structures, and economic weaknesses. Knowledge was power, and humans were gathering all the knowledge they could find. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Amy Foster worked in the intelligence center buried deep under the Rocky Mountains. Her job was to study alien psychology and find ways to use it against them. Amy had degrees in both military science and alien studies, making her perfect for this work. The Draknari respect strength above all else, she explained to a room full of military planners. They follow leaders who win battles and show no mercy to enemies. But this is also their weakness. They expect their enemies to act the same way. General Alex Rodriguez listened carefully. Alex had been promoted after New Eden and now ran all human military operations. He was a careful man who planned every detail before acting. What do you mean, Lieutenant? He asked. They expect us to attack their strongest points first. To challenge. Their best warriors, Amy replied. That's how they would fight. But we don't have to fight like them. We can hit their supply lines, their weak colonies, their isolated outposts. We can destroy their ability to fight before they even know the war has started. This was how humans had always fought when they were serious about winning. Not with honor or glory, but with intelligence and planning. They studied their enemies, found their weaknesses, and struck where it would hurt the most. Admiral Wright received daily reports from across human space. Every colony was working at full capacity to support the coming war effort. Miners dug deeper into asteroids to find metals for ship construction. Farmers grew extra food to feed the crews of massive fleets. Factories that once made consumer goods now produced military equipment. But the most impressive change was in the people themselves. Before New Eden, humans had been scattered across dozens of worlds, each colony focused on its own problems. Now they worked together with a unity that surprised even their own leaders. It's like the entire species has the same goal, observed Dr. Helen Park, a psychologist studying the phenomenon. The attack didn't just kill people on New Eden. It created a shared purpose among all humans everywhere. The alien species that had supported the Draknari attack began to notice changes in human behavior. Ships that had once carried trade goods now moved in military formations. Human merchants asked strange questions about alien fleet movements and base locations. Human colonies that had been open and welcoming became guarded and secretive. Ambassador Thiel, the Zentorian who had opposed the attack, sent urgent messages to the Galactic Council. She warned that humans were not acting like a species that had learned its lesson. They were acting like a species preparing for war. The human colonies are producing far more ships than they need for defense, she reported. Their energy consumption has tripled in the past year. And our intelligence. Sources report massive military construction projects on dozens of human worlds. But the council members who had voted for the attack dismissed her warnings. Humans were primitives, they said. They might build a few extra ships to make themselves feel safer, but they would never dare to challenge the established powers of the galaxy. War leader Vex, who had led the attack on New Eden, was less confident. He had seen human determination firsthand during the attack. Even as their world burned around them, human defenders had kept fighting until the very end. That kind of spirit worried him. He requested permission to launch follow-up attacks on other human colonies to finish the job before humans could organize a response. But his superiors refused. The message had been sent, they said. The humans had learned their place. On a secret base built inside an asteroid, Captain Steve Murphy met with other intelligence officers to share what they had learned. The room was filled with detailed maps of alien space, showing every important target within 100 light-years of human territory. They have no idea what's coming, Steve reported. The Draknari think their home system is safe because it's so far from human space. They've left only light defenses around their most important worlds. What about the other species? Asked Commander Julie Ross, who specialized in studying alien alliances. Confused and divided, Julie replied. Some want to make peace with us. Others want to attack us again before we get stronger. They're arguing among themselves instead of preparing for what we're planning. The intelligence officers smiled grimly. Human enemies were making the same mistake that had been made throughout Earth's history. They were underestimating their opponents and fighting each other instead of working together. Admiral Wright received the final report she needed. Human fleets were ready. Weapons were tested and proven superior to alien technology. Intelligence had mapped every target. Supply lines were established to support long-range operations. Most importantly, the human people were united behind the military effort. Every person in human space understood that this was not about conquest or glory. This was about making sure that New Eden never happened again. Karen stood before a holographic display showing the position of every human fleet. Hundreds of ships waited at rally points throughout human space. Each fleet commander had sealed orders that would be opened only when the operation began. Signal all fleet commanders, she ordered. Operation Prometheus is authorized. Execute on my command. Across human space, military bases came alive with activity. Ships that had been hidden in deep space began moving toward their targets. The largest fleet in human history was about to begin the most important mission humanity had ever undertaken. The aliens who had voted to attack New Eden were about to learn what happened when you killed human children and thought there would be no consequences. They were about to discover that humans never forgot, never forgave, and never stopped until they were satisfied that the threat was eliminated forever. 2 years after New Eden burned, the galaxy learned what human anger looked like when it was carefully planned and methodically executed. Fleet Admiral Tony Chen commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from his flagship, the Righteous Fury. The ship was new, built with technology that combined human engineering with captured alien designs. It was faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything the Draknari had ever built. Around him in space, 300 human warships moved in perfect formation toward Draknari territory. This was not the chaotic charge of primitive warriors. This was the calculated advance of a species that had spent 2 years learning how to wage war on a galactic scale. Sir, reported Captain Sam Wilson from the communications station, all fleets are in position. Fleet Beta is approaching the supply depot at Korax 7. Fleet Gamma has reached the mining colonies in the Outer Rim. Fleet Delta is standing by at the border systems. Tony nodded. The plan was working perfectly. While his main fleet moved toward the Draknari homeworld, other human forces were systematically destroying every Draknari outpost, supply depot, and colony along the way. The aliens would have no reinforcements, no supplies, and nowhere to run. War leader Vex stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the sensor displays with growing horror. Red dots filled the screen, each one representing a human warship. There were so many that the computer could barely count them all. How is this possible? He whispered. Intelligence said the humans had 50 ships at most. His second-in-command, sub-leader Keth, studied the readings with disbelief. Sir, I count over 300 vessels in the main fleet alone, and we're getting reports of attacks across our entire territory. Vex felt cold fear creeping into his mind. This was not the response they had expected. The humans were not sending a small fleet to test Draknari strength. They were sending everything they had. On the Draknari homeworld of Caraxus, Admiral Corax paced in his war room like a caged beast. Reports poured in from across Draknari space, each one worse than the last. Human fleets were everywhere, striking with precision and overwhelming force. They hit our fuel depot at Beta Scorpii, reported one of his officers. Complete destruction. No survivors. The mining colony at Rigel 4 is gone, said another. The humans didn't even try to capture it, they just destroyed everything. Corax slammed his fist on the table. Where did they get so many ships? How did they build such a fleet without us knowing? None of his officers could answer. The humans had hidden their preparations well. While the Draknari congratulated themselves on teaching the primitives a lesson, those same primitives had been building the largest war machine the galaxy had ever seen. Colonel Janet Williams led the ground assault on the Draknari military base at Proxima Station. Her Marines moved through the alien facility like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. They had trained for this moment for 2 years, studying alien tactics and learning how to counter every Draknari weapon. Sector 7 secure, reported Sergeant Bill Jackson over the radio. Found their command center, all alien personnel eliminated. Janet's forces did not take prisoners. The aliens had killed children on New Eden. Human soldiers remembered that fact with every shot they fired. The base fell in less than an hour. When it was over, Janet stood in the ruins and activated her communicator. Command, this is Colonel Williams. Proxima Station is ours. Beginning demolition procedures now. They did not occupy conquered territory. They destroyed it so completely that it could never be used again. This was not a war of conquest. This was a war of elimination. Commander Rick Davis specialized in siege warfare. His job was to break enemy defenses that seemed impossible to crack. The Draknari fortress world of Blackstone Prime was supposed to be invincible. It had shields that could stop any weapon and enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Rick studied the fortress for 3 days, looking for weaknesses. He found them in the most human way possible, by thinking differently than his enemies expected. We don't attack the shields, he explained to his officers. We attack the power plants that feed the shields. We don't fight their guns. We destroy the factories that make ammunition for their guns. We don't assault their walls. We collapse the ground under their walls. The siege lasted 6 days. Human engineers tunneled under the fortress while human ships bombarded it from space. When the shields finally failed, the fortress was defenseless. Rick's forces swarmed over it like ants covering a fallen tree. The Draknari defenders fought bravely, but they were fighting an enemy that had studied their every move. The humans knew where every weapon was placed, where every exit was located, and how every system worked. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Across the galaxy, other species watched the human advance with growing terror. The Hive Queen, who had supported the attack on New Eden, sent desperate messages to her allies. The humans are not fighting like we expected. They are destroying everything. They show no mercy. The Shard speakers, whose crystalline forms rang with fear, tried to contact human commanders to negotiate. We wish to discuss terms, they broadcast. Surely we can reach an agreement. Fleet Admiral Chen received their message and replied with cold politeness. Your terms are simple. Surrender completely and accept human authority. Refuse and be destroyed. You have 6 hours to decide. The Whispers, beings made of gas and energy, attempted to flee to the far edges of the galaxy. Human pursuit fleets followed them, hunting down every ship and station. There was nowhere to run from human anger. Zephyr 9, the ancient ethereal prophet, traveled frantically between worlds trying to organize some kind of defense. But everywhere he went, he found the same thing: panic, confusion, and the wreckage, left behind by human fleets. I warned them, he said to Ambassador Thiel when they met on a neutral station. I told them what would happen if they struck first against the humans, but they would not listen. Thiel's normally calm face showed deep worry. Can anything stop them? Surely they must want something other than total destruction. They want to ensure that New Eden never happens again, Zephyr 9 replied sadly. and the only way to guarantee that is to remove the threat completely. This is what humans do when they believe their survival is at stake. The Draknari homeworld of Coraxus prepared for siege. Admiral Corax had assembled every ship and warrior he could find, but he knew it would not be enough. The humans had already destroyed half his empire. Now they were coming for the rest. War leader Vex commanded the final defense of Coraxus. His fleet, once proud and powerful, was now reduced to a handful of damaged ships. He looked at the approaching human armada and knew that his people's time was ending. All ships, he broadcast, fight with honor. Make them pay for every meter of space for the glory of the Draknari Empire. The battle for Coraxus lasted 3 days. The Draknari fought desperately, using every weapon and tactic they knew. But they were fighting an enemy that had learned from every previous battle, that had prepared for this moment with obsessive care. Human ships moved with mathematical precision, each one knowing exactly where to be and when to fire. They had studied Draknari tactics for 2 years and knew how to counter every move. The alien fleet was destroyed piece by piece, methodically and without mercy. When the last Draknari ship was burning wreckage, Fleet Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the planet below. Admiral Corax, this is Fleet Admiral Chen of the Human Space Navy. Your fleet is destroyed, your defenses are broken. Surrender now and your people will be treated according to human law. Refuse and we will take the planet by force. Corax's reply was defiant. We will never surrender to primitives. Come and take our world if you can. Chen closed the channel and turned to his officers. Begin planetary assault. I want this over in 72 hours. The assault on Coraxus was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships bombarded military targets with surgical precision, while ground forces landed at dozens of points. Simultaneously, they had studied the planet's geography, its cities, and its defenses. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Admiral Corax died fighting in the ruins of his command center, his claws bloody from hand-to-hand combat with human marines. War leader Vex was captured alive when his position was overrun. As human soldiers bound his hands, he looked up at the human officer in charge. When will you stop? He asked. Your world has been avenged. Your message has been sent. When will this end? Colonel Williams looked down at him with cold eyes. When we're satisfied that this will never happen again. When every species in this galaxy understands what happens to those who murder human children. The Draknari Empire fell in less than 6 months. But the humans did not stop there. They continued their advance, hunting down every species that had voted for the attack on New Eden. The galaxy learned that human anger, once awakened, was like a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, and absolutely certain to achieve its goals. The ancient warning had come true. Someone had struck first against humanity, and now they would never stop. 5 years had passed since the war began. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It was the silence of a universe that had learned to respect human authority. President Claire Anderson stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the new capital of human galactic administration. The massive structure orbited what had once been the Draknari homeworld. Through the windows she could see the planet below, green and peaceful again after years of reconstruction. The war had ended 2 years ago, but humanity had not stopped working. They had rebuilt the worlds they conquered, but rebuilt them according to human standards. The cities were cleaner now, the governments more efficient, and the people safer than they had ever been under their old rulers. Admiral Bobby Martinez walked up beside her carrying a datapad filled with daily reports. As head of the Human Galactic Patrol, Bobby was responsible for keeping peace across dozens of star systems that now flew under human flags. How are things today, Bobby? Claire asked. Quiet, ma'am, he replied. 3 trade disputes settled, peacefully. 2 minor pirate groups eliminated by local defense forces. And the Zentorians have exceeded their production quotas for the 3rd month in a row. Claire nodded with satisfaction. The former alien empires were not just surviving under human rule, they were thriving. Crime was down, trade was up, and, for the first time in centuries, there were no wars being fought anywhere in this part of the galaxy. Dr. Nancy Brooks ran the Department of Species Integration from her office on Luna Station. Her job was to help former alien military officers and government officials find new roles in the human-led galactic community. It was challenging work, but rewarding. Today she was meeting with former war leader Vex, who had become one of her most successful integration cases. The Draknari warrior sat across from her desk, wearing the uniform of a human patrol officer. His red eyes still burned with intensity, but now that intensity was directed toward protecting innocent people instead of conquering them. "How are you adjusting to your new position?" Nancy asked. "Better than I expected," Vex replied honestly. "Your people are strange, but they are not cruel. When I was captured, I expected torture and execution. Instead, you gave me a chance to prove my worth in an honorable profession." Vex commanded a patrol squadron that protected shipping lanes from pirates. His knowledge of alien tactics and technology made him valuable to human forces. More importantly, his example showed other former enemies that cooperation with humans led to better lives than resistance. "The young Draknari respect you," Nancy observed. "They see that you have found purpose and honor serving humanity." "Because humanity offers something my old empire never did," Vex said. "Justice. Under the old system, the strong took what they wanted from the weak. Under human rule, even the weakest citizen has rights that cannot be violated." This was the key to human success in ruling their new galactic empire. They did not simply conquer and exploit. They offered something better than what had existed before. Former slaves became free citizens. Corrupt officials were replaced with honest administrators. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were restored to health. Zephyr 9 floated in his meditation chamber aboard Unity Station, his misty form more solid than it had been in centuries. The ancient ethereal served as an advisor to the human government, helping them understand the complex politics and cultures of the galaxy. President Anderson visited him regularly to discuss policy and seek his wisdom. Today she found him contemplating a holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. "You seem troubled, old friend," Claire said as she entered the chamber. "Not troubled," Zephyr 9 replied. "Amazed. I have lived for millions of years and seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, but I have never seen anything like what your species has accomplished." The display showed shipping routes, trade statistics, and population data from across human space. Every indicator pointed to prosperity and growth. Former enemy worlds were now productive members of the galactic community. "My people warned that humans would never stop once they started fighting," Claire said. "They were right about that. But what they didn't understand was that humans also never stop building once they decide something is worth preserving." Zephyr 9's form shifted as he considered her words. "Your species has a unique gift. You can be the most terrifying destroyers in the galaxy when threatened, but also the most generous builders when secure. The balance is remarkable." On the former Draknari world of Caraxus, children played in parks that had been built where military bases once stood. The planet's new name was Hope, chosen by the human administrators who had overseen its reconstruction. The children playing there included humans, Draknari, Zentaurians, and a dozen other species, all growing up together as citizens of the same community. Teacher Maria Santos watched her mixed-species class work on a history project about the war that had reshaped the galaxy. The children had access to all the records, the attack on New Eden, the human response, and the peace that followed. "Why did the aliens attack the farming planet?" asked a young Draknari boy named Kex. "Because they were afraid," replied a human girl named Lucy. "They thought humans would hurt them, so they tried to hurt humans first. But that just made the humans angry," added a Zentaurian child with blue skin. "My mom says humans are nice. Unless you hurt their families, then they become scary." Maria smiled sadly. These children understood the lesson better than the adults who had started the war. Humans were peaceful by choice, not by nature. Take away that choice by threatening their loved ones, and you unleashed something that would not stop until the threat was completely eliminated. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was very different now. The chamber where Zephyr 9 had once delivered his ignored warning was now filled with representatives who understood the new reality of galactic politics. Ambassador Thiel, the Zentorian who had opposed the attack on New Eden, now served as Deputy President of the Council under human oversight. She worked with human administrators to resolve disputes and maintain peace between different species. The motion to establish a new trade route through the Outer Rim is approved, she announced during today's session. Human Patrol Squadron 7 will provide security for merchant vessels. The council members voted unanimously. They had learned that cooperation with human leadership brought prosperity, while opposition brought swift and overwhelming consequences. It was not a lesson any of them wanted to relearn. In the archives beneath Unity Station, historians worked to preserve the complete record of the war and its aftermath. Dr. Peter Kim's medical logs from New Eden were displayed alongside recordings of human victory speeches and alien surrender ceremonies. The goal was to ensure that future generations would understand how the current peace had been achieved and what it cost to maintain it. Every child in human space learned about New Eden in school. They learned that freedom and peace were not free gifts, but precious things that had to be protected. Admiral Karen Wright, now retired, often visited the New Eden Memorial on Luna. The monument listed the names of every person killed in the attack that started the war. She had kept her promise to Commander Grant and the other victims. No alien force would ever again attack human civilians and expect to survive the consequences. Captain Jake Morrison, the human observer who had witnessed the original vote to attack New Eden, now served as humanity's chief diplomat to alien species. His job was to explain human policies and help prevent misunderstandings that could lead to conflict. Humans do not seek conquest for its own sake, he often told alien leaders. We seek security for our people and stability for our neighbors. Work with us toward those goals and you will find us generous partners. Threaten those goals and you will discover why the Draknari Empire no longer exists. The message was always delivered politely, but everyone understood the steel beneath the silk. Humanity had proven what happened to those who murdered human children. The lesson would not be forgotten. In schools across the galaxy, children of all species learned about the war in their history classes. They studied the attack on New Eden, the human response, and the peace that followed. The lessons were clear. Aggression had consequences. Cooperation brought benefits, and humans never forgot their dead. A young human student raised her hand during one such class. Teacher, will there ever be another war like that? The teacher, a former alien military officer who now worked for Human Education Services, considered the question carefully. Not if everyone remembers the lessons of this one. Humans are peaceful people who want to build and grow and explore, but they will never again allow their children to be murdered by those who mistake mercy for weakness. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their military might. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat when their survival was threatened. Strike first against humans and they would never stop coming, but offer them friendship and cooperation, and they would build something better than had ever existed before. The ancient ethereals' prophecy had come true in ways no one expected. The humans had indeed never stopped once the fighting began.